We're very glad to have amongst us Chief AI Officer of Qure.ai, Preetham Putha. Thank you, Mr. Putha, for joining us. And we have amongst us on the panel Karthik, Reddy, co-founder and managing partner, Blume VC. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Over to you, Reema.
Thank you very much, Ritika. So, Startup Nation. What are startups? Who are entrepreneurs? Well, they're the crazies. They do the unthinkable. When everyone is walking in one direction, they walk in the other direction. And when plan A fails, they tell themselves the alphabet has 25 more letters. So welcome to the Startup Panel, Startup Nation, powering this decade. We have with us the Young Turks. You know, CNBC-TV18 is synonymous with Young Turks. So we have the rising stars, the entrepreneurs from two key sectors, healthcare and agri-tech. We're going to be focusing on that, and we've got with us the man who's going to fund them all, Karthik Reddy of Blume VC, Venture Capital. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining in today. I'm Reema Tendulkar. So before we get started, I thought it would be quite nice to just understand a little bit more about these people, to know their journey, what their company does, what their startup does. So why don't you take it away, Dr. Dastidar?
Thank you, Reema, and thanks to CNBC for inviting me here to this forum. So, I am the founder and CEO of SigTuple, a medtech startup, and I think belong to one of those crazies that Reema talked about, because I decided to start a health tech startup having absolutely zero background in the medical domain. That's probably as crazy as it gets. And what we do is we want to automate the manual microscopic review process that happens in a clinical laboratory today. So you see, when a lot of sick patients require their biological samples to be looked at by a doctor under the microscope manually. And that process remains manual in 95% plus of clinical laboratories all over the world. Our aim is to automate that through robotics and AI.
So you've got a device which converts the blood sample into
digital
image, and then you use AI to analyze it and diagnose.
Yes.
So bringing down the turnaround down. Okay. So before we get to Krishna, we've got from Qure.ai, the chief of AI product. So Preetham, why don't you first tell us?
Hi, thanks for inviting me. This is Preetham. I'm currently the chief AI officer for Qure. At Qure.ai, we have products that can automatically read chest x-rays, CT scans, and MRIs and create a preliminary report within a minute. We are currently live in about 2,000 hospitals across 80 countries, basically augmenting diagnostic workflows for tuberculosis, lung cancer, stroke, heart failure, and osteoporosis. When we are talking about augmenting diagnostic workflows today, there is significant issue in terms of staffing shortages. There is a lot of physician burnout. We are trying to sort of be a clinical decision support tool that can augment a patient's healthcare journey and solve these issues.
Thank you very much. So as it happens, I think both the gentlemen here are from helping us with the diagnosis, whether it's blood, urine samples, or your scans, CT, MRI, etc., and coming up with more accurate diagnosis, faster turnaround time. Karthik, why don't you come in, right? I think right now we're just covering the ambit of diagnosis, but there is so much more in healthcare startups. There is predictive healthcare. You've got robots assisting actual doctors in their surgeries. So how do you see the healthcare startup in India, the challenges, the opportunities?
It's great. The sectors that you're representing today on stage are just two of the many. So from a venture perspective, we're a generalist tech fund. Our history is that we started 13 years ago as a $20 million fund. Come a long way. Now we manage about $600 million. And we've consistently stuck to one thing that we know best, which is to find opportunities at seed stage, right? So we come in really early. So the idea is to be ahead of the curve, to try and see what entrepreneurs are building and try to really be sort of at the beginning and the forefront of like transformative stuff. So within healthcare and AI and agri itself, Blume would have, for example, a Healthify or an Ultrahuman, which are trying to pick up data from consumer behavior and try to be more predictive on health. Which you can try and get people into the gym all day long, but essentially if you're not using that data or if you're not capturing that data, there is much lesser motivation for that consumer to try and improve their health. So we're beginning to see those kind of models. Of course, diagnosis, you're seeing two great examples of what the Indian ecosystem has thrown out. We are also seeing, within diagnosis, we have a company like Tricog, for example, which actually does that for ECG readings, like how they do it for blood samples and lung cancer. And within agri as well, I think, the fascinating part about applications of AI are they've been around for 10 years, like our friend from Google just said. And they've been applied to more data models and to, images which have been very, very specific to these kind of applications. So we have a robotics play called Nico, which actually looks for weeds and helps in spraying. And it's entirely done by actually cameras mounted on the back of a tractor. So the number of applications just keeps proliferating. I think the challenge and the opportunity from an Indian perspective is how can you deliver that innovation at a price point that is more relevant to either the US, and then you can build an American-facing company sitting out of India, and there's a lot of money in that. Or can you build something at a cost point that an Indian farmer can use and an Indian ECG administrator can use? And can we build, amazing models that can go to the third world, which arguably from a scale perspective is much bigger than the first world. And I think that is the India opportunity in AI, and doubly so in these two areas, which affect everybody every day, agri and healthcare.
The idea of selecting these two sectors, healthcare and agriculture, is because here every innovation can have a very deep impact. So for instance, in agriculture, I think the benefit of agriculture goes far beyond even the economic indicators. It impacts the social fabric. More than 1/3 of the Indians are in some way involved in agriculture and allied activities. And I think I read somewhere it's the only sector where the contribution of women in terms of hours put far outshines that of men. So the social and economic impact of agriculture and healthcare, of course, we need to make it accessible and more affordable, is very, very deep. So let's just quickly get that introduction from our other two guests. Krishna, why don't you go?
Thanks. Hi, this is Krishna. I'm a CEO and founder of Cropin Technology. So for people who don't know Cropin is a industry cloud for intelligent agriculture. We try to solve many complex challenges in this industry, putting data and AI in the front. And some of the challenges like how do you digitize smallholder farmer, which is across India or Africa? What does that platform look like? How do you bring all this data together and talk about long-term impact of those crops going to have because of the changing climate or rising temperature, or what disease can happen in next 7 days, or what yield you can expect at the time of the harvest, right? So can you be so predictive, and can you zoom into a plot so that a value can go to a smallest grower, whether he's in India or Orissa, or he's in Africa, or whether he's in Latam? Can you look at a microgrid of 10 by 10 meter scale to the choice he has made, the crop he has taken, the variety he's growing? Can you make it more contextual to him? And then you can zoom out to a country scale to talk about, okay, how the wheat or paddy or soybean is growing in the country, what will be the total output, and what should be the policy of the government, whether it's from the export or import or buying fertilizers at the county level or a district level, right? Or to underwrite a insurance program like that. So that kind of technology we're building. It's also working with a lot of research facing industries who are trying to build new traits in the seeds, which could be a drought resistance or certain disease resistant, right? You need a lot of data to play around and predict those traits in that. So those are kind of work we are doing. So impacting the life of the farmer at one end and scaling that to a country scale where the enterprises, dev agencies, and government can take decisions as well. Today, we are deployed in 92 countries. We manage around 30 million acres. We have a crop knowledge graph of 500 crops 10,000 varieties of those crops from these continents. That means you know how these crops are behaving behaving today in this changing climate, or what kind of pattern they are following. And we process around 200 billion acres of intelligence for our customers to use and take decision basis that in the real time. So that's pretty much we do. Thank you.
Very interesting. Varun, do you want to tell us? We've got Varun Khurana here with us. He's from Crofarm, Otipy. Tell us about the business and what inspired you on this journey.
Sure. Thank you, Reema. Thank you for having me. So just to give you a quick brief, see, we are a fruits and vegetables supply chain from farm to home. Broadly, the thought process is that when you're dealing with commodities that degrade so quickly, fruits and vegetables, right? We are talking hours. So in hours, the produce can change shape. So conventional e-commerce as it exists today is not really designed for commodities that have such lower shelf life. And which is why often we see, the need for when you go to a shop, you have to pick and choose because, produce has degraded. And when you order from e-commerce, you see variability in quality that you get because the produce has spent, varying times in the supply chain. So we have designed our supply chain, which can move produce from farm to home in as little as 12 hours. This gives us a very unique advantage because produce doesn't sit in our supply chain, and by virtue of that, we don't incur many wastages at all. So just to give you the numbers, while conventional supply chain sees 30% wastage, we see 3% wastage. So 10 times we've been able to bring it down. And that gives us a lot of power. We can pay our farmers a little bit more. We can give our consumers competitive prices. And this also makes our unit economics work broadly. So that is, the thesis behind the business, where consumers can get produce which is fresher at their home at a competitive price. Farmers can get more value for their money. Today in Delhi NCR, we do about 150 tons every day. In Bombay, we do about 25 tons every day. And actually, it is AI prediction that is used to actually predict how much we're going to sell the following day, which is what the farmers use as a guideline to harvest, and which is what consumers also use when they buy stuff on our app. So this is how technology, overarches this whole end-to-end supply chain to reduce wastages.
Interesting. Karthik, come in on, funding these agri-tech startups, right? One would think it's complex in a way that your models are based on probability rather than deterministic models. You're subject to the vagaries of climate. Like 1 degree change in the temperature can affect the crop yield substantially. There are flash floods taking place. So when you have to invest in agricultural startups, how do you go about it? And what do you think about the scalability of the sector to achieve it on a pan-India scale or at a global scale? The processes, the products?
So in India, I feel like opportunity sets fall into 2 buckets. One, which is essentially you go and build supply chains, or you build technology which sits on top of the aggregate value chain today. One scales beautifully because it doesn't necessarily rely on all the vagaries of what you just said at the ground level, which OTP has to worry about. Whereas if you take a Cropin, they're essentially building technology which is like sort of geography neutral in that sense and can become a global sort of monitoring system. So when we look at opportunities, we see whether there is enough value in the technology that end customers will pay for, whether that's corporates, governments, farmers. Farmers are the toughest to get anything out of. But you have to sit in the middle of that value chain if you're in an operational business, like he does in OTP. And that's how I would evaluate anything which is operational on the ground in India, versus a technology play looks very seductive because it's cool technology, but will anyone pay the actual value for it? Clearly, Krishna has shown that people do pay. And so we will usually try to bracket into these two sort of halves of how we look at agriculture as an opportunity set. But it's not easy. At seed, you don't know these answers. And as most people in the audience or on the stage know, failure rates in startups are high because that discovery is what we fund. right? So you essentially might have a technology, but might not be something that's paid for. And so the common jargon is there a product market fit? Product market fit is not whether your product wasn't great or not, whether someone's willing to pay the right price for it or not. And eventually that's where most startups slip and fail or become very subscale and becomes inefficient. But, you know, as I said, if you take something as simple as crops, weeding, and your what is a substitute product? It's a migrant labor pool which moves from cotton farm to cotton farm in Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh. So that cost is very, very measurable. The farmer is not going to pay 1 rupee additionally for any cool technology that you provide, right? In fact, it has to be more efficient at the same cost or lower cost for the efficiency that you're delivering. And essentially, the advantage that India has over most global providers, like if you go to an Israeli company or an American company, is we can deliver that technology at probably half to 1/5 the cost. And I think in that sense, we're just on the cusp of seeing the first sort of global players in health and agri, which historically was only seen as the realm of SaaS and software because it didn't require hardware and operational sort of cross-border migration. I think we're going to start seeing that. We're going to start seeing deep tech companies which become global, can become public, can become $1 billion of value. But we haven't even seen the first. So I am jumping the gun. But that's...
Are you skeptical?
No, I'm optimistic because I have enough in my portfolio which are headed that way. And with a gray orange which automates warehouses in the US, Carbon Clean which captures, carbon and is seen as one of UK's best innovators today because we exported the company to the UK. So the UK has claimed ownership of that, right? But they were all Indian companies, right? And just because they're domiciled in Delaware or the UK does not mean they're Indian companies.
So the promise of this decade is that Indian startups are going to go global. Up until now, it's been the realm of only SaaS companies.
Correct.
In the 90s, it was outsourcing companies. The early 2000s has been about SaaS. Yeah. But you're saying in the next decade, it's going to be these deep tech startups.
I'm just sticking to these two areas. There are a lot more. We're seeing in manufacturing, we're beginning to see orders come in from Israel and the US for a sort of 5-axis machining company in India, which we have in Bangalore. So it's beginning to happen in other areas as well. I'm very optimistic about this.
Okay. Getting these companies to scale. Very quickly, I want to talk about generative AI. We just heard that fascinating presentation from Subram, the kind of exciting opportunities that lie ahead, and the intersection of AI and any market that you're in. That's the current hot topic. That's the vogue. So can you tell us some interesting use cases that all of you all are using, researching, some pilot projects, some actual critical applications using, AI going ahead? Dr. Dastidar?
Sure. So in the field that we operate in, which is diagnostics, I am a bit skeptical about the applicability of generative AI.
But you all have so much data on your hands.
Yes, but therein lies the problem. Because generative AI learns from the data that we have seen. And can I guarantee that the data I have is equal to the cumulative knowledge of the doctors who have been learning the trade for decades? Therein lies the problem. If a diagnosis is being written of cancer, do you want to, or suspected cancer, do you want an AI to generate that diagnosis, or do you want the human to be assisted with AI, maybe with suggestions? But the diagnosis should remain in the hand of the AI.
So the big risk is that if your AI model throws up a false negative, right? You don't want that scenario.
Even false positives can be equally pestering because somebody might end up getting a treatment which he or she does not need, but they are, I would say, less dangerous.
It's going to go through one more stage where it will be checked and diagnosed, right?
But
so false negative is a big worry.
Yes, false negatives are the big worry. But however, AI has its applicability in the diagnostic space. Right from automating, predicting the sample quality, predicting what tests should be done one after the other. There are hundreds of applications. Coming specifically to generative AI, and use case I have been thinking of, we are not working on this. So suppose, there are doctors you see who can make a patient feel better just by talking to them, right? And some people actually have that ability to generate that confidence or generate that feel-good factor in people. And not everybody has it. And it is a skill which is difficult to learn. I'll probably never be able to learn it. But can the AI assist the doctor, the generative AI, assist any doctor to go to that level where they can actually say things which makes a patient feel better? I mean, this is just a dream that I have, not that I'm working about it, but maybe one day, yes, it's possible.
Preetham, what is your dream, aspiration? How are you planning to incorporate generative AI in your business?
So, I mean, there are two things, right? One is the generative AI stuff, that is the buzzword. The other buzzword that is coming out is foundational models. So, in terms of generative AI for healthcare, we are seeing that there is adoption starting to happen for those high impact, low risk applications, like taking away the clerical work that physicians do. There's a study that says 25% of a physician's time in the US is spent doing administrative tasks. This is like a really low risk opportunity to improve productivity, right? That is one. And anything that has to do with diagnostics and anything that is patient facing, there is significant regulatory scrutiny. I mean, there are a lot of questions that we have to answer, right? Like for example, what if AI gives a false positive and then because of that there is some surgery that happened due to which a lung lobe has been resected, right? Those are scary things. So anything diagnostic and patient facing, there's still time. I mean, there's one analogy with respect to generative AI, right? So it's as if a car has suddenly been given to the healthcare industry and none of the stop signs, traffic lights, or even the roads, are built for that. Because, I mean, in the sense that the digital infrastructure that is required to, capture all of these touch points and give interventions at those points is still not built out for healthcare in general. The second aspect is foundation models. We are working on medical foundation models. We have a repository of more than 1 billion images. 200 million or so images come to our servers from our live sites. So we are working on foundation models. So the sort of goal is to increase the sample efficiency. So for example, now if you want to solve a new problem, it takes about 100,000 images. Now with foundation models, with the context of 1 billion images, a model that has seen 1 billion images knows about human anatomy, knows what a CT looks like, knows what an MRI looks like. Now if you want to sort of create a new use case where you want to segment some tumor in the liver, that is sort of something that can be done with a significantly lower amount of data. Yeah.
Interesting. Krishna, your whole business model is built on AI, right? But AI is evolving much faster than you and I can imagine. So what's next for your company? How are you using AI now?
Yeah. So let me give you a few examples and what we are trying to solve, right? If you look at the vision of Cropin is to put intelligence on every farm which is possibly producing food for the planet, right? So how do you reach there? And the scalable technology is space. When you take images from the space, there are multiple bands, you train your models on that, and then predict about the crops. But the biggest headwind or problem statement is every day, 70% of the planet is covered with the cloud and shadows. So if your input is wrong to your model or there are errors, you're not able to do a good job in the accuracy. And we realize that when we are trying to deploy this technology at the country scale, right? So not somewhere you will find all these problems. And that's where the generative AI comes into picture, where you reconstruct the image. First you detect where is the cloud, then what angle the shadow is, and then you have to reconstruct the image beneath, then feed into your deep learning models to talk about the crop and the intelligence and doing all the predictive, right? That's it's a kind of architecture you have to build. And that's something called as a foundation model. And a foundation model is you can reconstruct anything using this, right? So you can generalize this to other industries as well. And what we built can also be generalized to other industry. So probably we have been working because we face that problem when we are trying to deploy at the scale. Now the use cases, let's come to the use cases. And I'll give you 2 examples. So one of the largest CPG company does potato, and we predict, and using all this technology in the background, we predicted a farm for them, and we were doing it in 5 countries. That, okay, this potato farm has reached tuber bulking stage. Now, the potato is within the soil, you can't see that, but these models are running. And prior to that stage is a tuber initiation stage. So tuber is small, the potato is small, now it has become bigger. So there was a senior agronomist, a scientist, there was a junior agronomist. So one of the guys said that, no, looks like this is a tuber initiation stage. The senior guy said, no, looks like it's a tuber bulking stage. So they decided to take out the potato, and it was in a tuber bulking stage. And one of the things we discussed with the senior scientists and everyone, if you can put such kind of intelligence on every farm with an equal lens, right? Even if you're 85% accurate, it's a huge improvement in the way you do. Because if everybody has if I see a farm with my experience, I can have a certain assessment. The senior guy comes in, he will have a certain assessment, right? So there's a lot of gut-based decision, experience-based decision is coming, but can you build science into that? And that's the job we are doing. But let's take example of Ukraine war, right? So there's a wheat shortage, fertilizer prices gone up, energy prices gone up, and the biggest concern for the governments, and we have been working with Nigeria government, where they are the bread eating economy. So they import a lot of wheat because they don't produce wheat in the country. So our job was to figure it out how much wheat country is doing. Can you predict that? Can you tell me how much is the sowing progression? What is the health of those crops in season? And before the maturity, can you tell me what the volume I'll expect so that I can do the forward contract, or I can import wheat at the right time and right amount because the prices has gone up? Or can I, if you can tell me a trends by county, I can ensure how much fertilizer to import for that, or buy for that county, or budget for that county, right? So look at the scale. One side is impacting it, looking at the, providing intelligence to a farmer, right, to change practices or apply, because your crop is moving faster, you need to do certain things on that or take certain decisions. At the same time, government can use this kind of technology to do that. So that's how you use this kind of a technology to power your knowledge graph, AI models and everything.
The only thing is right now it's very expensive, and who's going to be footing that bill? Karthik, you want to quickly comment on that?
No, I think the challenge continues to be, I think the power of generative AI is to, yes, you're right, it is expensive today. The key is going to be, can we use these models to be able to actually cut down the cost to a point where they become applicable to use cases of this nature, daily use cases, right? And if it's an agri, it's all our supply chains can be better, right? And I think we're going to be a more resource-starved, relatively speaking, or resource-constrained economy in terms of what efficiencies you want to drive. And that I don't think you can fix manually, right, anymore. So what we've done with milk production in this country is one marvel, but can we replicate that for every crop in this country? Can we become the forefront of, sort of getting enough forest cover, plant cover, such that we are actually contributing to be net carbon positive, in that sense, net carbon negative in that sense. All of this is going to be driven, I think, by how we measure things through AI. And it's inevitable that we'll have to build our own stack. We can't rely on the West giving us models on these. And so that's what I foresee, at least in agri per se. And in healthcare, I feel, there's personalized medicine or personalized treatment is essentially the future. And again, it's not a human, it's not something that a human mind can solve. And we'll have to feed more and more data, even if it's, of course, it has to be anonymized, but into these models to be able to generate better sort of prescriptions for how we treat people. Otherwise, we again can't scale this to 1.4 billion people effectively. And I think you can't get healthcare out, high quality healthcare out to every corner of this country or the world without solving for that. So I think directionally, these are the two things I would want AI to solve for these two industries at least.
Well, with a phone in everyone's hand and a device, we are getting deeper, smarter insights into our body, which will help with personalized medication. But, unfortunately, Varun, we're not able to take this question because we're completely out of time on this panel. But thank you very much for joining in. Hope you enjoyed it. I just want to end with one quote that I read about from Winston Churchill. He said, success is not final, failure is not fatal, hope, the courage to continue to move on, that's the key. So I hope we all do our part in making this decade India's Techade. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all the panelists for sharing your views. It was really interesting.